Well, it's been a year and a half since the truckers in Ottawa, Canada showed the world what it's like to stand up to tyranny, stand up to the Trudeau government, inspired similar trucker convoys around the world standing up to COVID tyranny and government overreach. And two of the leading faces of that convoy in Canada, Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, just began their trial this week. It resumes today. David Krayden, journalist for the Human Events and Post Millennium, and has his own YouTube channel, Krayden's Right, is in the courtroom covering this trial. And we had a chance to catch up with David. Great to see you, David.
Nice to be back, Clayton.
So this is a remarkable court appearance for these two. I mean, because the way that I've read some of these charges, it seemed like commit mischief, intimidation, obstructing police is what they're charging them with. That this, in many ways, would be sort of treated almost like a traffic ticket, but instead, 16 days in a courtroom, and they could face jail time as a result of this.
And that's precisely the point I'd like to make today, Clayton, is that the authorities on a municipal, provincial, and federal level have put so much time and energy and money into prosecuting two people who merely came to Ottawa to peacefully protest. There were no guns, there were no explosives, there were no threats. It was the Ottawa and provincial police that threatened them. And literally at one point, a horse rode over a woman in a walker. Now that's a threat. That's violence. There was no violence in this protest, and yet they're bringing up charges that are so ridiculous. Mischief. Well, that's usually something when somebody comes home drunk, and it's usually resolved very quickly. But however, they have laid 4 charges that could actually add up to some time in jail here. And this is outrageous, but what it really means, and all it really means, is that Tamara Lich and Chris Barber are political dissidents. And I find this to be embarrassing because right now Canada is being watched by a lot of countries in the world, including our own and the United States, which is covering this quite closely. And we look like a dictatorship. We look like we're putting people on trial, not for crimes, not for terrorist activities, but because they merely opposed Justin Trudeau's COVID-19 mandates, which meant that you couldn't work if you didn't get vaccinated. And that's what they were fighting about. That's what they were protesting. And this is no different than the Soviet Union putting Solzhenitsyn on trial for being opposed to the Soviet Union. These people were opposed to Justin Trudeau's policies. That's all this was about, and that's all this is about this week and for the next 3 weeks.
Well, you said that the United States, in comparison to Canada, might look more like a democracy now, comparing it to a dictatorship. But just remind you of what happened on January 6th, of course, and the tyranny, the people that are behind bars, thrown away without any sort of, seemed like due process, weren't able to be released on bail, being held in solitary confinement for things that should have been given like misdemeanors or nothing. And so that's where we're at with these tyrannical governments now, throwing people in prison. Now, I know Tamara Lich, she was held in prison a couple of times, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was in jail for the first time without bail for about 21 days. She was finally released on bail on a judge's order. She attended a free speech awards dinner in Alberta. The police arrested her for attending that dinner, flew her back to Ottawa, and put her back into jail. She was there for another 30 days without bail until, again, she was released. But I talked to Tamara about this. I've interviewed her a number of times, and I said, how did you feel? What kept you going? Because she literally didn't know what was going to happen to her because they wouldn't tell her. And she didn't even know at that point what she was going to be charged with, except opposing the Trudeau government. And she just said she did a lot of praying, a lot of thinking, a lot of meditating, and she got through it. And I wrote the other day, I said, this woman is so courageous because she went through this and she had no idea. The worst thing about a criminal offense and going through the justice system is not knowing what's at the other end. And she was never given all the facts. She was never given all the information. And it's the same with Chris Barber. I mean, this is a trucker. who decided he couldn't take the vaccination because he believed it was harmful to him. But he couldn't work because of that. He couldn't cross the border. He had to take that vaccine. He just said enough. And you've been covering this hysteria that's going on right now about the return to these COVID-19 mandates. I don't think this trial could be at a more timely time, because right now we've got the Ottawa hospital going back to mask mandates.
Oh, geez.
We've got people screaming to bring back the lockdowns and the mandates again, because we're on the cusp of another COVID outbreak, and it's all BS. We know it's all BS, and we know, and the same thing's happening with Joe Biden. His wife is sick, therefore we all got to mask up. The same thing is happening in Canada again, and I'm just waiting for these people, these same healthcare Gestapo people, to come down and say, everybody put on a mask, everybody lock down, because COVID's back.
You know it's coming. You know it's already coming. So you're in this courtroom. Just take me behind the scenes of what we're seeing now with this judge and the witnesses. So we were talking earlier, but it looks like they're going to have 26 witnesses. The Trudeau government is going to bring out 26 witnesses against these people. And what were some of the one of the first things that you reported on was about being called an occupation. The lawyers for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber on Tuesday said they would not tolerate the Freedom Convoy being labeled in these court proceedings as an occupation. What was the reasons for that?
Well, as Lawrence Greenspan, a very distinguished lawyer who's representing Tamara Lich, told me, he said, this is not just hyperbole and unnecessary, it's ridiculous. And they love to call it an occupation, because what is the connotation of that? Well, you think of the Germans occupying Paris, and is there any similarity here? Not at all. In fact, when I tweeted the other day, or I say posted on X now, I got a response from somebody who said, talk to my grandfather who lived through the Nazis occupying Warsaw. And he showed me a picture of the Germans rounding up Jews. And that's an occupation. People coming to protest in Ottawa is not an occupation. I was there for the 2.5 weeks every day. I was out there in those frigid February temperatures. And all of the stories concocted about the Freedom Convoy setting fires to apartment buildings, totally false. Defecating and urinating on the streets, completely ridiculous. Leaving garbage everywhere. The whole thing was manufactured. Businesses had the complete freedom to stay open, and those that did stay open made a lot of money. I have never seen Ottawa cleaner, actually, than during the Freedom Convoy. They cleaned up after themselves, they provided their own food, and they lived in a very civil manner while they were here. They were not honking horns all night long. This is all artificial, manufactured information, largely from the Trudeau government, but also from the local Ottawa mayor, who was in hysterics every time he saw children in bouncy castles, which the truckers had set up for their kids to play with while they were there. He hated that. He said, why are these people not taking this demonstration seriously? I used to laugh because he came totally unhinged. The people who were unhinged during the Freedom Convoy and the ones who are becoming unhinged right now during the trial are the federal, provincial, and municipal authorities who set this whole thing up.
What's been the most surprising thing in the courtroom to you?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm surprised at the judge, because as I've reported oftentimes, every time a judge or a justice is set up to oversee anything involved with Freedom Convoy, the Emergencies Act declaration, COVID-19 mandates, there's always something a little bit suspicious about that judge's background. Now, this judge has been exceedingly fair so far. Yesterday, I watched her dismiss an email that the prosecution wanted to bring up while they were interviewing a Ottawa Police Service inspector. And the judge said, did he write that email? And the prosecution said, no, he did not. And she said, why are you introducing this as evidence then, if he did not write that email? Now, that to me was a sign that she's not going to be brought down by the propaganda and by the pressure she's, I'm sure, feeling from a lot of powerful people in this city, in this province, and in this country. And I, from what I've seen so far, I think this is a fair judge who's going to adjudicate objectively.
What's next in the trial?
We're going to hear testimony from police for the next few days. I'm back tomorrow. But what's going to be very interesting is the testimony from so-called local residents that have been dug up by the prosecution to attest to how horrible life was during the occupation. So this is going to be interesting because a lot of these people have never told their story the same way when interviewed over at different times. And there's one woman who I'm very interested to hear because she's bringing a class action suit against the Freedom Convoy. And I've heard some very interesting things about her dual citizenship. I can't comment further on that right now, but I think this is going to be the bombshell next week when she appears on Wednesday. This is going to be world news because the prosecution perhaps should have suggested this individual not appear because she could be a liability to their prosecution. But I think she's going to be a boon to the defense.
Interesting. Well, we will cover it. We'll have you back as this trial unfolds. David Krayden, reporting at the courthouse or during the courthouse over the next 16 days in this very interesting Freedom Convoy trial in Canada. Thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.